Hi, everyone. I'm telling this story with a heavy heart because recently I had to give my disabled child up for adoption. Worst of all, part of me is happy about it, but I don't know if I can continue with my normal life and come to terms with my conscience. I'm Karen. I was 22 years old and I was a college student when I had a baby. It was actually my nephew, and I had to take custody of him. The thing is, I had an older sister, and 10 years ago she was going to get married, but our parents hated her fiance. The fact is, he was a 19-year-old guy with a lot of bad habits who got my sister into trouble, and it wasn't some minor trouble. Once they almost died in a car accident because of her boyfriend's drunk driving. Our parents had a few reasons to forbid her from dating him. So when my sister told us that she was going to marry him, there was a split in our family. There was a big fight, and my mom and dad kicked her out of the house. I was on the side of my parents, and from that moment, we completely stopped communicating, and I didn't hear any news from her. All the bridges were burned, and we began to live as completely unrelated people. It had been a little more than 10 years since that day. I was just coming home from class, and I got a disturbing phone call. It was social services. They said that my sister's parental rights were being taken away, and they were looking for guardians for her child among her relatives. Unfortunately, my mom and dad refused to accept the child. And if I also refuse, they will look for guardians for him among strangers. It was like a bolt from the blue. I had so many questions. My sister had a baby? How old was he? Why were their parental rights being taken away from them? I immediately contacted my sister to find out. In tears, she admitted that she and her husband had problems with alcohol, and someone had to take care of their son now. Despite all the problems that we had in the family, I agreed to become the guardian of her son. After all, the child was not to blame for the sins of his parents, and he should not have to suffer in an endless hell of foster homes. Unfortunately, my parents thought otherwise. They believed that the bad influence of my sister and her husband was like a plague, and that the child could pass it all on to me. Our family was at odds again, and this time I was the one who was left alone with my problems. The child's name was Mike, and he was 10 years old, and his sudden appearance caused a dramatic change in my life. I used to spend half the day studying, then go to work, and come home late at night. But now I had to look after Mike, so I had to make a choice. Since we always needed money for living, I decided to take a gap year to sort things out. I thought it would be all right and we could handle any problems. But Mike turned out to be a difficult child. All these years, my sister and her husband filled him with anger toward me and my parents. To them, we were the pure evil that kicked good people out of paradise. So Mike hated me from the very beginning, and he blamed me for all of his parents' problems. He refused to talk to me, and he didn't want to go to a new school. Sometimes he even threw away the food I tried so hard to make him. And to all my requests to just talk to me, he answered with this terrible phrase, "I hate you." And you may be surprised, but children can be very smart and angry. And it's a combination that you don't want to have. Because soon Mike realized that I was responsible for him, and his mischief took a different form. I was constantly called to school because of something that Mike had done. He would be rude to the teacher or hide in the bathroom to skip class. And every time I had to take off from work to come and see the principal. And every time I was ashamed of what Mike had done, and I just blushed like a tomato. He also had problems with his classmates. As far as I know, he was often bullied because he was adopted. Once the principal called me to school again. I saw Mike outside his office with a black eye. It turned out that he had an argument with a classmate. My nephew was very angry, so at one point he took his classmate's phone and threw it with all his strength against the wall. The phone crashed, and then, as you probably understand, there was a fight. The principal warned me that if things were to continue like this, I would have to find a new school for Mike. And of course, I had to pay for a new phone for his classmate. Okay, I was running out of patience. I put up with his little antics and tried to understand his feelings, but he was just a little devil. I tried my best to help him and make his life better, but he did not appreciate my efforts and continued to rebel. To be honest, I lost my temper for the first time in months and I yelled at him. Do you think it was easy for a 22-year-old girl to take care of a child? Do you think it was easy for me to find almost $1,000 to pay for his classmate's damn iPhone? Jesus Christ. Why didn't he understand that I was just trying to take care of him? So that night I admitted to myself for the first time in my life that I hated this child. But he refused to understand how hard it was for me. He refused to accept help and to make his life better. Months passed and things got worse. I started to think my parents were right. This child was spoiled and he was dragging me down with him. Thank God summer was coming and I was able to get Mike into a summer camp. I breathed a sigh of relief when he left. I took a vacation from work and was going to spend a whole month just lying on the couch, taking a break from the crazy circle of worries. There was also another great piece of news on the horizon. My sister got in touch and told me that she and her husband would soon be completing a rehabilitation course for alcoholics, and they wanted to try to get their parental rights back and take Mike home. Wow, this news gave me hope that my life would return to normal. In addition, if my sister and her husband get rid of their bad habits, perhaps our family will be reunited again. I was floating in these dreams with a smile on my face. But as is usually the case, bad things happen very suddenly. I got a call from the summer camp and was told to go to the hospital immediately because Mike was in intensive care. When I arrived, things were just awful. It turns out that Mike and his friends had escaped from the campsite that night to swim in the lake. One of them suggested jumping into the water from a really high tree, and Mike volunteered to be the first. So he climbed to the top and jumped into the water to the applause of his friends. Unfortunately, he hit the bottom hard and had to be pulled out of the water. The doctors said that he had damaged his spine and now he would not be able to walk anymore. My world just split in half at that moment. What a terrible tragedy. I didn't know what I was supposed to do now. The worst part was that I had to tell his parents about it. It was the hardest phone call of my life. When I broke the news to my sister, she was devastated. I tried to support her, but she didn't pick up the phone again. I suspected they were drinking again to deal with their grief. So much time and effort were wasted, and I was left alone with a disabled child that I had to take care of. It was a living hell. Every day I woke up thinking I needed to help Mike get dressed and help him come to the kitchen to eat. Hell, he couldn't even go to the bathroom without my help. I literally did everything for him. And he just sat in a wheelchair and said nothing. He thought it was my fault that he was disabled because I was the one who sent him to summer camp to get rid of him for a month. His words were killing me. I just wanted to disappear and cease to exist so that I wouldn't feel the endless pain of caring for him. After a month of this life, I became a completely different person. Even my appearance had changed. I was 22, but I looked like an old woman who had never slept in her life. Depression weighed on me like a huge rock, and other problems were added to it. My vacation was over and I had to go back to work. But my gap year was also ending, and I needed to continue my studies. I'll be honest, my hands just dropped and I made a decision that changed my life. I decided to give Mike up for adoption to other people. Yes, exactly. I know it's just awful and it was the act of a weak person. In that case, consider me a weak person. I wasn't ready to sacrifice my life for a child who hated me. In the end, I would turn into a person who hates all of humanity and my life. I told Mike what I was going to do. His reaction was what I expected. He insulted me and said it was all my fault. Then I made a call and social services started looking for new guardians for him. A couple of weeks later, he was taken away and my house was completely silent. I was sitting there all alone and I didn't know if I'd made the right decision. I was hoping that the people who would take care of him would be stronger than I was and that they would be able to endure all the difficulties. Also, I still have hope that my sister and her husband will give up their bad habit and will be able to bring their child back. then Mike will definitely be happy. And now I will continue to study and work, and I will try to become a better person and succeed. Only then will this sacrifice not be in vain.